this life is just a dream, are we living the dream or is the dream living us? And so, if, if our consciousness is the key, are we using our consciousness just to exist or are we using our consciousness to consider other existences? Hello, everybody. This is Cosmico here. It's good to be here. I wanted to open up a new front on YouTube with the hopes of reaching out other people that are interested in these topics, right? Connecting with deeper truth and other realities. But first, I wanted to thank you all because the community on Reddit it's been growing organically. I would dare say we have now nearly 1,500 members, and that's impressive. So I would like to thank everybody who's been a part of this journey. The map or the guide that I created could not have been possible to be created without the help of you, because as we learned along together with other so-called experiencers or so, um, we managed to draft the contact guide that I like to call more of a map to use your consciousness and how to align yourself with higher frequencies in 7 steps, right? But anyway, so from the bottom of my heart, thank you, and also thank you for those that encouraged me when it was needed to keep on writing. I honestly never thought that people would believe me, and I was afraid to speak up. So that being said, today I wanted to introduce myself on this new front that we're opening, and thank you guys. And I wanted to tell you a little bit how it all started for me. My first contact experience, the contact experience of the third kind, as they call it on this world. Um, I'm sure some of you have read it, but I'm sure some of you have processed memory differently, right? Me, for example, I like to listen a lot to podcasts, and I know that people are busy, and sometimes they don't have the time to go and read, especially when my readings can be a little bit messy, I have to admit. So I would like to tell you how it all started for me, if you care to listen and walk with me, if you will, at least virtually through this first transmission. So, well, first of all, I'm now in Brazil, so I do apologize if things do get loud. There's traffic. Sometimes there's concerts. I'm sharing the apartment too, so there's other people walking. So I do apologize for that. But let's start digging, right? Let's get to the story. And so this happened back when I was in Europe. I lived there for nearly 15 years. Um, I'm lucky enough to have the double nationality. So whatever, I was living in Europe. That's the whole point. And I was there with my cousin. It was a summer night, a late summer night. We were by the lake. We were just like speaking, talking, looking over the horizon. Just like catching up, talking about life and whatnot. Back then in 2011, I was, I think, 25 or about to turn 25, if I'm not mistaken. So I was talking with my cousin. We were just chatting when all of a sudden, like, I felt something different in the air, like a static, if you want. It was like the wind was howling, but more than hearing it, it was like I could feel it, like I could feel something going on in the air. And then I remember vividly that the voice of my cousin, it just became like back noise. Like I could hear him, but like there was something else that was like in the air. like a whisper. Um, and so we sensed something because we had not yet completely seen it on our right, sort of on our 6 o'clock, as some people would say, and there were these two orbs. Later, I would understand that. And as I turned my eyes to my right, try to, lock eyes, it felt like they were looking back at me, kind of like when two curious souls lock eyes, But before I could even comprehend, like, what the hell was that? Like, they just like dematerialized, vanished out of thin air, and then appeared much more closer this time. These two orbs, right? And this time around, it was at our 12 o'clock. So, and it was like 300 meters. I don't know how much that is in yards, but 3 blocks away from us, up in the sky. So really close, right? And I was just like mesmerized. I was just mesmerized. And then they did something that I would never forget. They did one of they did something that literally would make me question reality for years to come. So what they did is they flashed a light, then they dematerialized, they appeared again, and then they flashed another light before the flashing of the first light was gone. And they did this consecutively 3 times, you know, like effectively moving faster than the speed of light. It was like literally bending the rules of this reality. Like it was like them saying, like, you think nothing can move faster than this reality? Well, what do you think about that? You know, the most interesting part that I shared on the first contact chapter as well is that while this was happening, this little show, I entered in like a trance, for lack of a better word. It was non-invasive. I have to say that it was at no point did I feel like threatened or being invaded or forceful, but I was completely overwhelmed by this force in the field, right? So while this little show was going on, I entered into a trance state, and it was my first state, the taste of a telepathic communication, right? And it was like we were one. Like they could see through me, and I could see through them. Like there was no line. And so as they were flashing the lights, they asked me, and so, do you remember yet who you are? Are you ready to join us yet? And then instantly I felt fear. I was like, whoa, like what the hell? Like, and the moment that I felt fear, that they smelled that or sensed that, they just vanished out of thin air. They just completely vanished. So then I was completely awestruck, like in disbelief. Like I thought I had just had like hallucination or something. Then I turned to my left to look to my cousin, to to see if he had also seen what I had just what we had just witnessed, right? And I could tell it in his face even before speaking that he had also seen what I had saw. Like I will never remember his eyes. Like, dude, like what the fuck was that? And yes, so this was my first contact experience of the third kind, I think they call it these days. Back then, like I was young, I was about to start a corporate career. Like I was deeply attached to this realm, and I had no idea about like other dimensions or like stuff like that. Like I mean, I was just a regular, normal, logical thinking person, and like most of us, we're made to believe that there's only this dimension and like nothing else, you know. And especially back then, you know, for the longest time, I myself thought that, you know, like these UFOs, these orbs were um, spaceships, you know, like spacecraft or flying saucers, like they used to call them, you know, with like maybe a little green man or what have you be, you know, like piloting their little crafts, you know. Only much later would I truly understand what they are, you know. And so I went on with my life. This was in 2011, and it was quite funny because, in a way, I guess psychologists would say that I internalized the experience. I didn't talk about it with anyone for years, not even my cousin. In fact, I never told my cousin about the telepathic exchange because I thought that, you know, it was just too much. I just shoved it under a carpet and carried on with my life. You know, my cousin on the other side, he externalized, I guess psychologists would call it that experience because he likes getting tattoos, right? Like everything that happens in his life, like he gets like a tattoo, like a reminder or whatever. And on his on his left leg, he got a tattoo of UFO, you know, of a flying saucer, not an orb, of a flying saucer, and a guy being beamed out, you know. So yeah, so we never spoke about it ever again. We just carried on with our lives. I gotta say, I did pretty well for myself in my corporate career, you know, but and I just forgot about it, you know, until the pandemic hit. And so in 2020, when the pandemic hit, I had had enough of my job, and they wanted to relocate me to another city that I was not happy in the corporate life that I had, you know. So they gave me like the famous golden handshake, as some call it. Basically, they just paid me out, and I was like, well, of course I'll take that, you know. So I decided to step away of my of, of my job, and then the pandemic hit. It was 2020, and so I had a lot of time to like think about things and, you know, wonder and ponder about like my life, my purpose, my path, where I was going, you know. And of course, like this experience, you know, it resurfaced, you know, it resurfaced because actually that experience, for as crazy as it was, it felt much more real than this whole reality combined, you know. And I know in the end it's just a questionable story, you know. It's just a guy telling a story, you know, like who is there to believe, you know. The cops actually they reported it. They actually saw it, and this was published on the local news. I kept the article, but me and my cousin we were there, you know, we were there. So going back to the story, in 2020, I began on my soul searching adventure, you know, and of course this experience resurfaced, and then I went down like 1,000 rabbit holes about like UFOs, ETs, like man, I had to go through like mountains of like shit to like get a little bit of one spoonful of truth, you know. There's just so much noise and so much confusion and so much distraction in these topics, you know. People that have been following ufology for some time now, they have noticed this, you know, that there's a clear effort to confuse us and distract us from bigger truth, right? I would say that the most uncomfortable truth is that, as the ancient called it, repeatedly across different different times up until this date, is the notion that this reality that we live in perhaps might be of um, illusory nature. You know what I mean? So not real. This is something that in ancient Hinduism they call this world the Maya. In Buddhism, they call this the samsara wheel. The illusion that we need to live to awaken. The Gnostics said the same. That this world was a false, corrupted um, creation. And now with the rise of quantum physics, we are arriving to similar conclusions. So that's very interesting. How truth echoing from the past up until this day, resonating the same message, arriving to the similar conclusion as to the real nature of this world. And I think this is something that the people in power, or the powers that be, how they call it, they know very well. You know, they have access to like information that we could never dream of. And I think this kind of information, especially the existence of another reality, is very disruptive to the system, right? Because the system relies on citizens, relies on taxpayers. You know, it's a machine. For me, the way I see the system is it's simply it's a machine that runs on on taxpayers, right? But the question is, who benefits? Anyway, sorry for derailing. So in 2020, when I started digging back into these topics, I started going out at night on my own. There was a little forest where I had a good overview of the horizon, and I tried with like my mind just like remembering that experience that I have had back in 2011. It's like, okay, guys, like I'm ready now. Like I want to know what the fuck happened. Like what did I see? Like tell me more. Surely enough, I think within a few days, must have been, I don't know if it was the second or the third day that I was out there. Just I was feeling a bit silly, just sending out like um how to say a connection request with like my thought. But I was like, I remember this moment. I remember this moment. Like, please, now I'm ready. Like, I need to know what the hell was that. And surely enough, as I was saying, on the second or third day, they appear. This time, much less dramatic as my first encounter. Right? I saw them like I guess most people are seeing them now. Like objects in the sky dancing and doing things that are not linear. Because if you see a comet, shooting star, or a satellite, or a star like a Starlink, a satellite, they follow like a clear linear orbital path. Like whereas the orbs, they just dance. They go from left to right, they go upwards, they shape forms. So it's obviously something uh, anomalous, not from this reality. I guess there is no arguing against this. For me personally, everybody's welcome to their own truth. And so in 2020, I started going out and meditating. Well, meditating, not really meditating because I have a I'm an overthinker, and I have a very loud mind, I have ADHD. Or I was just like self-reflecting. Yes, that's the right word. I would go out, I would see the orbs, and I was just like wondering about life, like what was like the purpose of it all, like wondering why like there's so much suffering, and like all of these like existential questions, and one idea led me to the next idea and so on and so on. And I thought it was just me like self reflecting. And then one day I was there. I guess I must have done this for like 2 weeks straight. Not every day, but like every second, third day. Like at least two, three times A week I was going out there and just like self reflecting, And the second week it hit me, I was there. I kept on seeing like these orbs in the sky dancing, And then all of a sudden it hit me, the ideas that I was having, like I was having a conversation with them, And then I remember very vividly, that when it hit me, it was not in an intrusive way because again, I was curious, I was the one who wanted to know more, I was like, why, but why like this and why this other thing? And then like more ideas would come into my head, and I was like, okay, now I get this, but like, what about like this other thing, And then boom, boom, we would jump to the next idea, and I thought it was just me like self reflecting until I realized that I was having a conversation with them. And when I realized that, like they stopped moving, you know, and I took that like what? Like, are we like, is really going on? I thought I was losing my mind, to be honest, speaking with like dancing stars or orbs in the sky, Like, these are things that in this reality we are taught that, like it's a no go, And so naturally I pulled back. I pulled back because I needed to like digest that, process that, whether that was possible or not. And so, surely enough, after I gathered enough courage, a few days later, I go out again to this field at night, determined to know whether was it in fact me self-reflecting, or was I perhaps exchanging ideas with something from beyond this plane, right? And so I go there, armed with courage, and I call out onto them, they appear, I see them, and I'm like, look guys, I'm really enjoying these conversations, like they're really deep, like I resonate with like a lot of things that I'm yeah, that we're discussing and like exchanging, but I need to know like, are these just my ideas, or are we actually like talking to each other in like a way, and then they did something that I will be forever, how to say, grateful for. They basically said, "You're not going crazy. You're just remembering, and you're awakening." You know. And then I was like, "Okay, cool," but like, human ego base. Like I need some proof. Give me proof. And so I asked them with the utmost respect, and humbleness. I was like, okay, I can deal with this. Like if this is real, like I can deal with this. This may be possible, but like show me a sign, show me a sign. And so I requested them for them to move to the right, and so they moved to the right. I requested for them to move uh, downwards, and then they went downwards. I requested them for them to go to the left, and they go to the left. And they're like, "So you see now? Are you happy now?" Man, I couldn't believe it. It was like my moment of eureka. Like holy shit, like there's something out there that's like trying to interact with us. And I was deeply thankful for this experience because it put away my fears that I was going insane. As we are taught to believe. In this reality, like hearing voices is like one of the worst things that can happen. Like, oh, you're going schizo now. But for me, to be honest, it's not even a voice. It's more like a feeling. Now, I do understand from speaking with other experiencers that each experience is adapted and uh, to the user. So people sense 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 things differently. In my case, it was more like a feeling. It is more like a feeling when I still talk to them. It's more like I could feel their ideas, and they could feel my ideas more than a voice. So anyway, that was like my breakthrough. And I was like, well, this is awesome. Like I want to like further explore this. Absolutely, like thank you. This is amazing. Like let's continue. Unfortunately, as life would have it, you know, I think a lot. I think control is a bit of an illusion. The pandemic was a real test of that. Like sometimes in your life you have one idea and things go the other way, and you have to adapt and keep on going, right? So because I planned it, I had planned on expanding this relationship, on cultivating this relationship further with them, but then like things started going like the wrong way in my personal life. I was in a relationship that was not very healthy. um I had decided to step away from my job. There were very little jobs available. I had like an existential crisis uh, that I'm responsible for, but I also have to admit that I find it rather funny how like strange things started happening. Strange distractions aligned themselves in this moment when I had decided to connect with these messengers from beyond, right? So I ensured that I didn't have the mental capacity or the right headspace to continue this, and so I would ignore it. I was tired of living in Europe. I had been to this country previously, to Brazil, and I knew that at some point in my life I wanted to come down here to Brazil and live here. And as soon as I managed to navigate um, the distractions of my life, which took me nearly 4 years, I think. Uh, but when I finally was, how to say, uh, when I finally was free, with no backpack full of stones holding me down, I was like, okay, I'm moving to Brazil. I'm leaving. So I arrived here, if I'm not mistaken, in 2023. And again, I was busy here, like setting up a base. It's a new country. I already spoke the language, so that helped. But like still, like trying to like know your surroundings. What are you gonna do? Where are you gonna live? And all of these things also kept me di- distracted from reestablishing this connection. The best part is that we're always in control, and when you want to kickstart again the connection, you left right you sorry you start right from where you left before. You know what I mean? So in 2024, I think it was late November or October, this huge wave of UFOs started appearing all over the world. I think it was first in England at some airport, and then in New Jersey, New York, which is one of the largest metropolitan areas in the world, right? Like if you want to draw some attention, like you go there, right? And especially like flying over like military bases and like stuff like that. Like I think that sends out a clear message that they don't bend or abide by the rules of this reality, right? And so in 2024, I felt like this urge to like come out and like tell my story, like because like there was so much noise, like people speaking about like alien invasion, and like there's also this app that they use now um to call them out with your thoughts, and even the app says beware if you see like a spaceship coming down or like beings coming down, like be ready for that. And I haven't heard of one single person. I've been in the circles now, experiences, that have had this happen, like a spaceship coming down and like something happening. But to each their own, right? And when this was happening, and all of this noise, all of these distractions, no, it's hidden tech, it's drones. I knew exactly what it was because I've had like previous experiences. So So I started like sharing my views on the matter, and I was like telling people to like encouraging people to like tune in with their presence, and this is how it all started, really, you know. And then people seem to be interested in reading my experiences, you know, and this is how it all started, really. Um, and so yes, this is the first transmission. I'm going to be focusing now on attempting to publish a book, uh, a version that is less dark than the past one, trying to focus on the positive. I will try to publish that in Portuguese, but I think maybe through this new, uh, through this new front, this new channel, we can still keep in contact. And on the second part, I plan on describing the map because I don't like the word guide, or because guide means instructions. So yes, so this is my first transmission. This is Cosmico out of Brazil. It's good to be with you, maybe not physically, but at least virtually, um, in voice. And for those courageous souls that are willing to do so, and that have tried the map that I presented and have already managed to establish contact, I would greatly appreciate it if you could comment on the YouTube section or wherever about your experiences, so that we can all encourage other people by sharing our stories that there is something more, something perhaps even more ancient than this whole reality, that is non-reactive, that is non-invasive, and that is longing to reconnect with us and make us remember our true essence. That perhaps we are much more than these identities that we could cosplay as in in this this realm. Correct? That perhaps there is we live in a little aquarium and there's a vast ocean out there waiting for us, but it's us who have to take the initiative, right? So if you could just comment or share your doubts, I'm happy to um, try to be of help. And thank you once again for the community of Beyond Babylon for being a part of this journey, for sharing your stories, and that's all. I wish you well, a good entry into the weekend, and we'll be hearing from each other real soon.